I got this bracelet from a guy in the steam room back in Arizona.
In an era when athletes were expected to be silent, polished, and obedient, one man refused to play by anyone's rules. Charles Barkley didn't just crash the NBA, he collided with it, loud, unfiltered, and unstoppable. From throwing down monster rebounds to throwing verbal grenades at critics, Barkley was never the hero the league wanted, but he became the one it needed. He was fierce, funny, flawed, and frighteningly honest. He challenged racism, fame, and even the idea of what it meant to be a role model. And somehow, through every fight, suspension, and headline, America couldn't look away. How did a short, stocky kid from the poor streets of Alabama rise to become one of basketball's most unforgettable icons, and later one of television's most fearless voices? This is the story of rebellion, redemption, and the rare kind of honesty that can only come from someone who's never been afraid to be himself. Charles Barkley. Charles Wade Barkley was born in Leeds, Alabama, a small working-class town in the Deep South, where red dirt roads and old racial divides ran side by side. His father left when Charles was still a baby, leaving his mother, Charcy Glenn, to raise 3 boys on her own. She worked long hours as a maid and a clerk, scraping together enough to keep food on the table. Growing up in the 1960s, South meant more than poverty. It meant fighting to be seen. Barkley, short and overweight as a kid, was often overlooked, even mocked. He didn't look like the athletes people imagined. But inside that round frame was a fire, stubborn, defiant, and relentless. In high school, coaches barely noticed him, until one summer, he shot up nearly 6 inches and transformed into a rebounding machine. That growth spurt changed his life, but it didn't erase the chip on his shoulder. Charles carried Leeds with him. Every doubt, every insult, every reminder that he didn't belong. Those early scars would become the armor of a man who would one day tell the world, without apology, "I am not a role model," because before he became Sir Charles, he was just a kid who refused to let the world decide his worth. At Auburn University, Barkley didn't look like a prototype basketball star. He was shorter than most forwards, heavier than most centers, and often out of breath by halftime. But once the whistle blew, something else took over. He played with pure instinct. Ferocious rebounding, fearless drives, and a kind of improvisation that defied logic. Fans called him the round mound of rebound. He embraced it, the nickname, the doubt, the jokes, and turned them into fuel. By 1984, the NBA was entering a golden age. Magic, Bird, Jordan. And then came Barkley, drafted by the Philadelphia 76ers, a team of veterans and egos. Many thought he'd crumble under the pressure. Instead, he exploded. He crashed into games like a storm, grabbing rebounds over men 6 inches taller, diving into crowds, arguing with refs, taunting rivals, laughing through it all. He didn't just play basketball, he performed it. But the league didn't quite know what to do with him. He was too loud for the system, too blunt for sponsors, and too authentic for the media. Yet every time he stepped on the court, he turned chaos into highlight reels. The world was watching, not because Charles Barkley fit in, but because he refused to. The spotlight had finally found him, and he was ready to burn brighter than anyone dared to. By the early 1990s, Charles Barkley had become more than a player. He was a phenomenon. In Philadelphia, he dominated the paint with raw strength and a showman's flair, but his outspokenness often collided with coaches, teammates, and the press. When he was traded to the Phoenix Suns in 1992, many thought it was the beginning of his decline. Instead, it was the beginning of his legend. In his first season in Phoenix, Barkley was unstoppable, averaging career highs, dragging his team to the NBA Finals, and earning the title of Most Valuable Player in 1993. For one brilliant year, he was the face of the league, a force of will standing toe-to-toe with Michael Jordan's Bulls under the blinding lights of the finals. The world saw Barkley at his peak, sweat-soaked, defiant, smiling through the chaos. He wasn't the fastest or the tallest, but he made the court feel like his stage. And when the 1992 Dream Team, the greatest basketball roster ever assembled, stormed the Barcelona Olympics, Barkley was its wild heart. He scored, he joked, he taunted opponents, and somehow became one of the most beloved figures of the games. But behind the laughter and bravado was a man wrestling with the loneliness that comes with fame. He'd achieved everything: money, trophies, global recognition. Yet he couldn't escape the feeling that the game, and the spotlight, demanded more than it ever gave back. Still, Barkley refused to dim his fire. He told reporters, "I may not be the role model you want, but I'll be the one you remember." At that moment, Charles Barkley wasn't just an athlete. He was a symbol of defiance in a league built on conformity. And soon, that defiance would test him in ways no game ever could. At the height of his fame, Charles Barkley was everywhere, on magazine covers, late-night shows, and highlight reels. But with every spotlight came a shadow. His temper, once part of his charm, became his curse. Barkley was suspended multiple times for fights on the court, elbows thrown, words exchanged, tempers flaring. He argued with referees, clashed with coaches, and sometimes with fans. In 1991, he famously spat toward a heckler. The spit accidentally hit a young girl. The image haunted him for years. Then came the words that would define and divide his career. In a 1993 Nike commercial, Barkley looked into the camera and said, "I am not a role model." The line shook America. Parents were furious. Politicians lectured him. Commentators called him reckless. But Barkley stood his ground. "Just because I dunk a basketball doesn't mean I should raise your kids." He wasn't trying to be perfect. He was trying to be honest. In a world that demanded athletes to be saints, Barkley reminded everyone that heroes are human. Off the court, his gambling habits and nightlife drew tabloid headlines. He was open about his flaws, even joked about them. But behind the humor was exhaustion. Fame had made him rich, but it also made him a target. Through all the chaos, Barkley never hid. He faced criticism head-on, often turning it into comedy, sometimes into confrontation. He once said, "People like me because I'm real. People hate me for the same reason." And maybe that was the truth of it. Charles Barkley wasn't built for image. He was built for impact. The storm of scandal didn't destroy him. It revealed what he was made of. And from that wreckage, something unexpected began to rise. A new kind of voice, one that no longer needed the court to be heard. When Charles Barkley finally stepped off the hardwood in 2000, he didn't fade into silence. He simply found a new arena. The court was gone, but the microphone became his weapon. Joining Inside the NBA on TNT, Barkley turned a post-game analysis show into one of the funniest, most unpredictable programs on television. He didn't filter himself. He didn't care about being politically correct. He spoke the same way he played, with force, honesty, and humor that could cut through any tension. Fans who once booed him now tuned in just to hear what he'd say next. He mocked players, roasted politicians, debated race and money, and somehow made it all feel human. The man who once divided America had now united it, through laughter and brutal truth. Off camera, Barkley grew softer. He donated millions to historically black colleges, funded scholarships, and supported charities across Alabama and beyond. He began to reflect publicly on his mistakes, the fights, the arrogance, the weight of fame. He once said, "I've learned that you can't change the world by pretending to be perfect. You change it by being real." In his second act, Barkley didn't just rebuild his image. He redefined what redemption looked like. He showed that imperfection, owned with grace, can become a kind of greatness no trophy could ever measure. Today, Charles Barkley stands as more than an athlete, more than a TV icon. He's a mirror reflecting the truth about fame, failure, and courage. He taught us that greatness isn't born from perfection, but from the willingness to stand alone, to speak when silence is safer. In a world obsessed with image, Barkley dared to be authentic. He turned his flaws into stories, his controversies into conversations, and his voice into something larger than basketball. He never asked to be a role model. Yet somehow, he became one, because the measure of a legend isn't how often they're loved, but how deeply they're remembered. Charles Barkley's journey proves that honesty, raw, fearless, and human, will always echo louder than any cheer from the crowd.